This is Center Stage, putting lawyers in the spotlight by highlighting attorneys and other industry experts to help take your law firm to the next level. Hey everyone, and welcome to Center Stage. I'm your host, John Henson, and this week we are talking about building your marketing foundation. And I know that a lot of you, probably all of you, have some sort of marketing strategy in place, and we're not really going to be talking about tearing it down and starting from scratch, but I wanted to get some insight from our guest this week just about what we can do to strengthen the foundation that your marketing is built on. And so, like I said, this week I am joined by Mr. Danny Decker. He's been working for lawyers, probably like close to a decade, if not more now, right?
Yeah, 11, 12 years, something like that.
Yeah. So this is the perfect guy to talk about all of that. And so, before we jump in, Danny, why don't you just take a minute to kind of introduce yourself and tell everybody about yourself?
Yeah. So thanks, John. And it's exciting to be here. So as some of your listeners probably know, I'm quite intimately familiar with Spotlight Branding and the team there. I was one of the original co-founders. Mark Snigley and I started way back in the day, 2011, something like that is when we started Spotlight Branding. And obviously, Spotlight has done tremendously well. And then in 2018, I sold my ownership in Spotlight Branding to Mark. And I have since started my own consulting agency called Marketing Simplified. And I do a lot of strategic marketing consulting with lawyers, but also with a lot of professionals in other fields, everything from, CPAs, mental health therapists, to manufacturers, and kind of a wide range of, I would say, small to mid-sized businesses, typically between about $250,000 in revenue on the small side, all the way up to, typically up to maybe 2 million or so. But then I have a few clients that are quite a bit larger than that. And so I get to spend a lot of my time just working with business owners and leaders, really honing in on their marketing strategy. And as I know, John, there's a big difference between marketing tactics and marketing strategy. And there are a lot of service providers out there that offer tactical services. But in my opinion, there's not enough strategic oversight and strategic planning happening. And so my vision and what I do with my business is really help business owners crystallize their marketing strategy and then build out the tactics to kind of support that strategy.
Yeah. And that's why I wanted you really to do one of these shows with us, because I know you have a lot of experience, a lot of thoughts and insight into this. And so
listen, before we get into the stuff, like before we start talking about marketing and all that stuff, I have a question for you, John. And that question is, who is the last person to beat you at a match of ping pong? And when and how long ago has it been since you've lost at ping pong?
Yeah, Ben will get me every now and then. Gosh, I mean, we haven't. So with the pandemic and everything and all of the social distance stuff, we haven't been playing as much. I had a hard time actually adjusting to ping pong and wearing a mask at the same time, because that's just the rules that we had in our office. So he would get me every now and then with playing with a mask, but
so like a couple times a year type thing, like
maybe a handful. Yeah.
Okay. For anyone who doesn't know, and I don't know if you brag about this on the podcast or not, John, but John Henson is a ping pong machine. And I take pride in the fact that when you started working at Spotlight Branding, and you were working with me, and I beat you quite a bit back when you had never played ping pong in your life. And then it took you about 6 or 8 weeks, and it got to the point where I never beat you. So, anyone who's listening to this, if you want to get your butt kicked at ping pong, just stop by the Spotlight Branding offices.
Yeah. Well, you can absolutely take credit for teaching me everything that I know.
Oh, I will. I fully take. It was totally me.
Oh, awesome. So jumping in here, like I said, kind of at the beginning, I'm going to assume that everyone out there listening has some sort of marketing plan, some sort of marketing strategy in place. And Danny, I know that you've been doing this for, like you said, 10, 12 years. So in your experience, what are some of the mistakes that most lawyers are making with their marketing?
Yeah. Great question. And I would say it honestly starts in the mindset. around marketing. And I think that your average lawyer, and we'll see if listeners of this podcast agree with this or not, but your average lawyer doesn't even really have a full understanding of how marketing should support their law firm and what the point of marketing even is when you own a small law firm. A lot of lawyers just think that marketing means, creating a logo and just throwing a website up, or it means an SEO campaign, or whatever the case may be. They don't really fully understand that a properly dialed in marketing system is the fuel for your entire business, and it makes your entire law firm work so much better and reduces stress and reduces anxiety and really allows you to grow your law firm into the business you want it to be. And what I mean by that is an effective marketing system not only brands you as an authority, which you guys obviously do very well at Spotlight Branding, not only makes you attractive to your ideal clients, but really fuels your law firm with a steady inflow of referrals, of new leads, of prospects ready to have an intake conversation with your team and ultimately sign up and become a client. And when you have systems in place that do that predictably, everything else just gets so much easier. And John, I know I know you've seen this, and I see this all the time, where like your average lawyer, very much like your average professional outside of law, tends to view marketing as something they have to like do themselves, and it's very manual. And so like networking is an example, or even like holding lunch and learns in your office, which are all great things to do. But the problem is, if you're the one with responsibility for doing it, what happens is you do some marketing, you get some clients in the door, but then you get busy doing the work. And so the marketing stops. And then 2 months later, you've cleared out your caseload, and you look at your pipeline and it's completely empty. And then you panic. And so it's this whole like boom and bust cycle that I think so many lawyers get themselves stuck in. And I think that's kind of number one, is just from a mindset perspective, understanding that that's not how it should work. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And, kind of to your point about tactics versus strategy, the networks, the lunch and learn, stuff like that, that is probably what you can call a marketing tactic. But then if you don't have a strategy behind it, if you don't have a why as to why you're networking, why you're having these lunch and learns, and you don't have that system in place to do something with the business cards you get, the connections that you make with those events, you're almost wasting your time because you're just going out networking and then not doing anything afterwards.
Yeah. And I think that's the best, that's the key point in all of it, is you've got to have the systems. And that's what you guys do so well at Spotlight, by the way. One of the things you do really well at Spotlight, of maximizing the effort that you're putting into it. So it's like, great, you're holding a lunch and learn at your office once a week, but what happens with, and you get 20 people who attend, and like one of them actually contacts you right after and requests a consultation and signs up and becomes a client, fantastic. But what are you doing to stay in touch with the other 19 people? Yeah. All of whom, by the way, the fact that they showed up at your lunch and learn, they're a hot prospect.
Yeah.
You don't show up at a lunch and learn if you're not seriously interested in what that business or that law firm has to offer. So it's almost negligence to take those other 19 people and not plug them into an email follow-up system, not plug them into a social media follow-up system. Like you're doing 90% of the work, and then you're just dropping the ball at the very end. But that's where like the real opportunities are found, is putting these systems in place. And I just think so many lawyers work. It's almost, you've heard the conversation around the doctrine of self-sacrifice and how, lawyers are conditioned almost to feel like they need to suffer. Yeah. And it's like that mentality almost keeps them from putting systems in place, because it really doesn't have to be that hard. It doesn't have to be this manual effort where you as the lawyer are doing all the work, making it rain day after day after day, and it's all in the back of your relationships. You can use tools, you can use technology, email, social media, video, to really like amplify the work that you're doing. So yeah, I think that just makes a huge difference.
Yeah. And one of the things you just mentioned, and that's so key, is plugging those extra contacts into an email system. And I've heard you say this before, but like, an email list is probably your most valuable marketing asset, but it is probably the biggest underutilized piece of communication that you have. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, and that's such an interesting conversation. Before we even get too far into that, I wanna hit on the first part of what you said, which is why it's such a big opportunity to create an email list. And because a lot of people think, well, obviously you use your email list just to, you send them email, which is true and is important. But you can also, like your email list, you can also take that and you can load it into social media platforms, and then you can target ads to your email list. And that's so powerful because now not only are you reaching people through email, but you're also showing up in their Facebook feed day after day after day after day, their LinkedIn feed day after day after day. And then you can take the next step and you can build what's called a lookalike audience, which is where you take your email list and you plug it into Facebook, and they use their artificial intelligence to basically say, okay, these are 1,000 people that you told us are on your email list. We're going to crunch the data and say, if those 1,000 people are good prospects for you, here are 10,000 more people that are likely to be good prospects for you. And then you can target your ads to those people as well. And so it's so cost effective. It's so highly targeted. It's just really, really powerful. And it all starts with an email list.
Yeah.
And so I know you guys at Spotlight have this conversation all the time too, but now circling back to the question of like why it's so underused, I want to get your thoughts on this too, because you have this conversation all the time. But I think it's a couple different things. I think one, it's honestly, it's maybe a little bit of laziness, where it's like, creating an email list the first time you do it, it might kind of suck. You might have to go back through 20 years worth of emails in your Outlook account and gather up all these business cards. But guess what? You spend an hour or two doing it, or better yet, you get your assistant or your paralegal or whoever to do that for you. And now you've got this email list that you can use in all these different ways, that we just talked about.
Yeah. I mean, there are so many different places you can look to start. I mean, as with anything, like the initial setup of something there's going to be a time commitment up front, but think about the ROI that you're going to get every day after that. Like, sure, spend a couple of hours or have someone on your team spend a couple hours doing it. And now when you have it done, you have this huge marketing tool that is at that point so easy to replicate and continue to send out on a regular basis.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the other part of it is, and this is a conversation that I hear all the time too, is lawyers in particular, I think, are very sensitive about the idea of feeling like they're spamming, spamming people or somehow bothering them by sending out email. And so I think that would probably be a good conversation for us to have for a couple minutes about how, why you shouldn't be afraid of sending out emails. And the first thing I'll say is, as long as you've had some sort of personal contact with that person, as long as you've exchanged emails with them or met them and you got their business card, as long as there's in some capacity where you had a personal exchange with them, you are 100% within the law and in compliance with the CAN-SPAM Act to add these people to your email list. And you're not doing anything wrong. It's true that a small percentage of your people who get your emails are probably going to be annoyed and they're going to opt out. But that's 1 out of every 100 or maybe 1 out of every 500. And guess what? That person probably wasn't going to be a client or a referral source of yours anyways. Yeah. Meanwhile, the other 499 of them are. And so wouldn't it be a shame not to reach 499 people who might be a good referral source or a good potential client because you're afraid of pissing one person off?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, if anyone out there is subscribed to our list at Spotlight Brain, you get at least 1 email a week, probably 2 or 3, depending on what we've got going on. And look, I'll be honest, like we usually have a dozen or so people unsubscribe, but we also have a really big list, and that's okay because we replenish those with new leads that come in. And to your point, I see it as the more emails that I send, the more quality my list almost becomes because I'm weeding out people that weren't going to work with us anyway. They weren't interested in what we had to say anyway. And now I continue to have this higher quality list that's going to potentially become clients, or that could potentially refer us to another attorney who may not be on our list.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. And I think the other piece to this conversation is understanding that it's true. Like, you're going to have issues if you're just sending people just spammy, crap in your email. But if you take the time and put the effort, and this is again something you guys do well at Spotlight for your clients, to actually create content that is useful and relevant to your target audience, I think you would be really surprised how many people actually look forward to getting your emails every month or every week or whatever it is that you're doing. And John, I know you guys, for your own marketing at Spotlight Branding, you guys are all about providing educational, interesting, relevant content to your list. And I mean, this podcast is a great example. I assume that this will probably go out in an email at some point. And it's not about you at Spotlight Branding spamming lawyers. This is you providing them with education and you helping them solve problems. And as a lawyer, you know so much about the law and your area of law, and most of your subscribers don't know anything about it. And so you have a huge opportunity to educate them and bring them value. And so as long as you take that approach and you're not just sending them cookie recipes, right?
Yeah.
Then I think your average person is going to actually look forward to getting your email each month.
Yeah. And God, to that point, that is one of my biggest pet peeves. And it's almost like at this point, it's this weird love-hate relationship, because there are a couple of attorney newsletters that I subscribe to that I stay on their list specifically because I want to see how they piss me off every month when they send a newsletter out, because it's either got like a cookie recipe in it, or like the main article is about like some national day of the month that was like 3 days before they actually ended up sending it. It's like, hey, National Pokemon Day was on July 3rd, and I'm reading this. The email comes in on July 7th. Like, how is this relevant to me right now? Like,
and unless they're a Pokemon lawyer in the first place, like, then why the hell are they sending that? Because it's true. And I think that's where we get into these issues with, and this is another mistake that we can, add to the list of common legal marketing mistakes. When you just go hire like real cheap or just like completely automated, marketing services where all the content they give you is just basically, it's just like syndicated content that they're using for lawyers, no matter their practice area and other professions too. And you just get this super boilerplate content. Like, real estate agents are notorious for this. Like, I probably get like 10 emails a month from, real estate agents that it's like my directory of upcoming events this month. And it's clearly all coming from the same central database or whatever. And that's how you end up with crappy emails that people unsubscribe from. But when you actually take the time to create relevant, original content, it's really powerful.
Yeah. And so, just to kind of wrap this up, what exactly does that content look like? What makes something educational, informative that you can put in those emails?
Yeah, and that's great. I think that the short version is it's the intersection of your expertise. So, right, if you're a business lawyer, it's your expertise as a business lawyer and what you know about the law, where that intersects with the real problems that your target audience are having. So as a business attorney, you have all this knowledge. Business owners, meanwhile, most of them have little to no knowledge. And so what can you bring them to help them avoid problems, help them solve problems, help them spot opportunities? So that's where it's things like everything from, 5 tips to help you avoid getting sued, maybe a blog entry about the pros and cons of an LLC versus an S corporation. All these things that seem so basic and simple to an attorney, but your average business owner out there, may not know that stuff. And another great area to go when you're thinking up topics is like, if there is news that's happening, like let's say like, when the PPP happened last year and that came out, there's obviously a huge opportunity for business owners to get funding for their business, but most of them don't know anything about the PPP. And so I saw more than a few really smart business attorneys, creating content, helping people understand the program and how to how to apply. And so it's like looking for opportunities to just educate people on things that you know about, that they don't know about, that can make a big difference in their business.
Yeah. And if you want to learn more about it, we had an episode come out a few weeks ago with Laura Briggs from Lawyerist, and we talked all about content for law firms and what you should be creating. So if you're interested in learning more about that, go check out that episode. So to switch gears a little bit, because this is kind of one of the flags that we've planted here at Spotlight Branding, is kind of going against the grain of the predominant prevailing message from a lot of other marketing companies out there. And that is the importance, or the perceived importance, of SEO. And it seems like, especially from our perspective, that's just what's always been pushed. Everyone just kind of makes it seem like SEO is the holy grail of marketing, that that's what all you need to do in order to be successful. But in the end, it's almost always a bad investment. Why is that the case?
Yeah. We could talk for a whole hour just on this alone.
Yeah.
But yes, the average attorney hears nothing but, oh, you need to spend money on SEO. Like, that's the most important thing you can do to market yourself. And there's just a whole litany of problems with that. One of which is that it's a zero-sum game. If you're a divorce attorney here in Charlotte, North Carolina, there are thousands of other law firms that also do family law, hundreds, if not thousands.
Yeah.
And if all of them are competing for that space on Google, well, guess what? You only have about 5 or so people that can get high enough up on the first page of Google that it even matters. So your 5 law firms that are willing to spend the most money to dominate those keywords are gonna do well. They're certainly gonna have the most visibility. If they get enough traffic to justify the cost of that investment, maybe that turns out that it's actually a winning campaign for those law firms. But what about the other thousands that are competing for the same space when there can only be a handful of winners? And so it's a zero-sum game. And to win, especially if you're at all in a competitive market, you have to spend so much money, and there's no guarantees. And it's one of those things where I'm kind of big on like looking for the motivation of really anything, whether it's business or politics or whatever. And why is SEO such a popular thing that everybody's pushing? And my personal theory is that most marketing companies, like, let's put it this way, SEO is easy money and little accountability.
Yeah.
If I wanted to start an SEO agency tomorrow, I could, and I could charge $1,000 a month, and my clients will have no idea what I'm even doing because nobody understands how it works. I'll tell them it might take 9 months before they see any results. So I just bought myself 9 months of time to basically do nothing.
Yeah.
And then when 9 months come along and they're still not on the first page of Google, I'm just going to say, well, it's because Google changed their ranking structure. And so now I need another 9 months. And it's just like, there is just no visibility, no transparency, no accountability. It's easy money. And I just think a lot of lawyers waste a lot of money every month chasing after that.
Yeah. And especially if you're like a solo or small firm, small law firm, where maybe your revenue, your marketing budget isn't as big as some of these other larger law firms, you're constantly fighting that uphill battle. And so many attorneys, like, we hear it all the time, they're just so frustrated with their marketing. Why doesn't my marketing work? This is probably one of the bigger reasons why, is because you're jumping from SEO company to SEO company, and that they don't have any accountability. They give you the same runaround like you just described. And it's like, especially because I think you made an important point. If for the market leaders, for the biggest firms, they probably have a very large marketing budget, and they can afford to spend money on SEO. But your average firm, that $1,000 a month could go a lot further in any number of other areas. Like, there are just so many things that are going to be a better use of your money than SEO. Targeted Facebook ads, email marketing, content development, video, podcast. There are just so many things that I would rather you spend your money on than search engine optimization. And guess what? If your firm gets big enough that you can do
all of those different things and still have some money to invest into search engine optimization, go for it.
Yeah.
There, you might get lucky and there might be some value there, but there are just so many other places that you should spend your money. And it's painful to see all of it just going down this SEO, black hole. And I know that, John, and team at Spotlight, that's kind of been one of the things there since Spotlight Branding was founded. But it's just wild how much money is poured down that search engine optimization drain every single month.
Yeah. And to kind of transition here to my last question for you, just to go off something you said, if your firm does get big enough and your marketing budget does get big enough where you can start investing in some SEO, we've seen it work a lot better if you have a good content strategy in place as your foundation first, because your messaging is clearer, you have good content. There's more that an SEO company can work with that's a little bit higher quality, and you tend to get a little bit better, higher ROI, a little better quality website visitors, better conversions on all of that. Yeah. So with that in mind, what are some of the first steps and that a law firm should make when it comes to building out or solidifying their marketing strategy?
Yeah, that's a really great way to think about it. And it's almost like if you're a brand new law firm and the first thing you do is go spend a bunch of money on SEO, but your website isn't very strong yet and you don't have much content. And it's almost like if you own a retail store or something and the store itself is like a mess, but you go spend all your money on billboards to drive all these people to your store, but your store is a mess and you're understaffed and no one can find anything. You just wasted a whole lot of money and you have a bunch of frustrated potential customers that are never going to come back to your store because the experience was terrible. So the opposite, you need to do the opposite of that. You need to, so listen, I'll take a step even further back. If you're a brand new law firm and you don't have a ton of money to spend on marketing, honestly, the first thing you need to do for the first few months is really hustle with the networking and the relationships and have these conversations and start to build your book of business organically. There's no substitute for that. Especially if you're relatively new and you're not well known yet, because those key relationships and those key referral sources are going to be that's your bedrock where your business is gonna come from for months and years down the road. And then you start supplementing that with systems to stay in contact with those people. So that's where the very next thing I would do is get an email newsletter started. And so as you're hustling at your BNI meetings and your Rotary Club meetings and your Chamber of Commerce meeting, you're plugging these people into your email system. So now they're hearing from you week after week, month after month. And so you start to get referrals and you start to build top of mind awareness. So those are two of the first places I would start. And then an immediate, third is going to be with a strong website. Yeah. From day one, you should have something up on the web, even if it's just a simple, do it yourself on Wix, one page website. You need to have something. Yeah. But then as soon as you're really starting to get established, that's where getting a professionally done website that's loaded with really good content, that has clear messaging, which, that's another 1 hour conversation we could have, John, right. But I know you talk about that a lot. Messaging, think about StoryBrand, where you're really communicating, not how great your law firm is, but where you're communicating about the problems that you solve for your clients. And so you have to have that messaging dialed in on your website, and then we could keep listing things on top of that, but that's where I would start, is with a solid networking strategy, a solid email communication strategy, a solid website with good content, and then probably a social media presence, right? And if you're a B2B lawyer, LinkedIn is going to be very fertile ground for you. Yeah. If you're B2C, Facebook is going to be great for you. And you'll notice that SEO was nowhere near the top of that list. And there's a lot of things I would want to do before I got to SEO.
Yeah, I completely agree. I don't have anything really left to add to that. So yeah, I think with that, we'll kind of wrap it up here. Before we kind of close things out, Danny, how can people, whether you're an attorney or not, how can people reach out to you and pick your brain about their marketing strategy?
Yeah, thanks, John. So you can check out my website, which is DannyDeckerMarketing.com. And what I would actually suggest you do is I have a free resources tab on my website. And I have a number of kind of worksheets and other resources that are totally free, including a worksheet to help you get really crystal clear on who your ideal client is. I have some worksheets about how to generate more leads. I got a lot of really I think really useful, easy to understand content there, and it's totally free. So I would suggest checking that out. It's DannyDeckerMarketing.com. I also wrote a book called Marketing Simplified, which is available on Amazon.com and BarnesandNoble.com. My podcast is called the Marketing Simplified Podcast. So I got a lot going on. If you're a podcast person, go check that out, or get my book, or just start with the website. And like I said, there's a ton of free content on there. Get on my email list, and I'll shoot you some really good stuff to get you thinking about your marketing strategy.
Awesome. And all of that info will be in the show notes, so you guys can check it out there. So yeah, we'll wrap up the show with one last question. If you had one piece of advice for our attorneys out there, what would it be?
Get serious about building a marketing system that works for you, instead of putting yourself in a situation where your marketing is completely reliant on your effort and your relationships day in and day out. Like, don't build a marketing, don't base your marketing on your own effort and your own phone calls and your own networking. Build a marketing system so that you can go on vacation for 2 weeks and your marketing keeps happening, or you can be busy in court for a month and your marketing keeps happening. There's just nothing worse than waking up one morning and realizing you've got nothing in your pipeline. You've got no idea how you're going to cover payroll on Friday. Your cash flow is a complete disaster. That's just an awful place to be as a business owner. And the way to avoid that is to build a marketing system that works for you and doesn't require your active participation day in and day out. So that would be the number one piece of advice, is start thinking about marketing as a system that you're building out, instead of something like a boulder that you got to push up the hill like yourself.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's, we've talked a lot about delegating on this show. We've had a couple of episodes where, we've kind of focused in on that. And that's one of those things that should absolutely be delegated. And I'm not saying hire Spotlight Branding to do that, although we would be happy to, but get someone to do it, whether it's an in-house person, a vendor, whoever. Delegate that, get that off your plate, and have it running in the background, like Danny said, to, flatten out those peaks and valleys and get more consistent, with your cash flow. So that's going to do it for us this week. Continue to rate, review us on Apple Podcasts. And if there's any other topics that you want to hear about, love getting the feedback that you guys are providing for us. And yeah, that's going to be it for us this week. Danny, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, John.
All right. See you later. Thanks for listening. To learn more, go to spotlightbranding.com/center stage.